Welcome to today's event on American Medina and Sanctuary, contemporary expressions of faith, identity, journey, and safe havens. My name is Amir Ali, and I am the MC for today's event. Today's program is proudly being presented to you by the Ismaili Jamaat and Center in partnership with the Aga Khan Museum and the Chicago History Museum. Through the guidance of His Highness the Aga Khan, the 49th hereditary Imam or spiritual leader of the Shia Ismaili Muslim, the Ismaili Jamaat Khanas around the world are more than places of worship and spiritual search. They are places of friendship, dialogue, and inclusivity, reaching out to neighbors to facilitate an exchange of ideas. This is achieved through hosting events that aspire to stimulate the intellect, encourage dialogue, and celebrate culture diversity to foster an appreciation of pluralism. At the opening of the Global Center for Pluralism, the Aga Khan explained, and I quote, "Pluralism does not mean the elimination of difference, but the embrace of difference. Genuine pluralism understands that diversity does not weaken a society, it strengthens it. In an ever-shrinking, ever more diverse world, a genuine sense of pluralism is the indispensable foundation for human peace and progress," unquote. These spaces hope to encourage community engagement and collaboration on issues of concern, as well as broadening intellectual horizons. To adapt to current circumstances, the Ismaili Jamaat and Center has created a virtual platform to continue these dialogues. I'd like to welcome Dr. Zahra Jamal, who will serve as the moderator for today's session. Dr. Jamal is an associate director at Rice University's Boniuk Institute for Religious Tolerance and a diversity, equity, and inclusion corporate trainer. Previously on the faculty of Harvard, MIT, and the University of Chicago, she consulted on gender, generation, race, and religion for the UN, State Department, Department of Justice, Aspen Institute, Aga Khan Development Network, and private corporations. Dr. Jamal, thank you for being here today. And with that, I will hand this session over right to you.
Thank you so much, Amir, for that very kind introduction. Good evening and welcome to our virtual audience from around the world and to our esteemed panelists from Chicago, Illinois in the United States and Toronto, Ontario in Canada. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Peter T. Alter, who is Chief Historian and Director of the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History at the Chicago History Museum, where he has worked for over 21 years. Peter leads the Chicago Muslim Oral History Project and curated the museum's exhibition called American Medina, Stories of Muslim Chicago, which opened in 2019. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm also pleased to introduce Dr. Michael Chagnon, who is curator at the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto. He is a specialist of painting and the book arts of the early modern Persian sphere and has held curatorial positions at the Japan Society in New York, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the Brooklyn Museum. He has also taught at Columbia University and a variety of other places. Michael curated the recent sanctuary exhibition at the Aga Khan Museum after its initial showing in San Francisco. Michael, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This evening, we have the rare opportunity to get a behind-the-scenes look at these two distinct, fascinating exhibits, each curated by one of our panelists. What connects these displays is their shared engagement with four themes: identity, faith, personal journey, and safe haven. Together, we will explore how these themes take shape differently in each exhibit, From the memories and beliefs of everyday Muslims in the windy city of Chicago, to the value-laden material objects produced by global artists who communicate through their craft in sanctuary. I'd like to begin with American Medina, which originated from the Chicago Muslim Oral History Project. This display invites visitors and viewers to learn more about what it means to be Muslim in Chicago, as we hear moving stories of ardent faith, multifaceted identities, and arduous personal journeys recounted by over 100 local Muslims across Chicago. Peter, can you please share with us a bit more about this exhibit?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Zahra, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm so pleased to be here today and to be talking about American Medina, Stories of Muslim Chicago. First, while I get us started here, yes, we are the Chicago History Museum. We're an independent nonprofit museum and research center located on the north side of Chicago, about 2 miles from downtown Chicago. We were founded in 1856, and we are the oldest cultural institution in the city of Chicago. I, yes, am the director of the Studs-Terkel Center for Oral History at the Chicago History Museum. Through the Studs-Terkel Center for Oral History, we do collaborative community-based oral history projects using tools of history and oral history for goals of social justice. Many of our oral history projects are often youth engaged, and we'll see that at the end of my presentation that is also the fact for the Chicago Muslim Oral History Project and the exhibition American Medina, Stories of Muslim Chicago. We believe through the Studs-Terkel Center for Oral History that we carry forward the legacy of Studs-Terkel, that Chicago-based oral historian, Pulitzer Prize winner, DJ, actor, and all-around documenter of people's lives. And so we have in our archives about 7,000 of his tapes. And towards the end of his career, Studs-Terkel was a scholar in residence at the Chicago History Museum. Our first slide here is, yes, the entry experience for American Medina, Stories of Muslim Chicago. I want to begin talking about the exhibition specifically. Why would the Chicago History Museum do such an exhibition? So early in the 2000s, our president at the time had the idea for what became known as the Catholic Chicago exhibition. That exhibition did happen in 2008. The succeeding president had the idea not only to focus on the Roman Catholic communities of the city and suburbs of Chicagoland, but also to expand that to focus also on the Abrahamic or Abrahamic faiths. And so in 2012, we opened the Jewish Chicago exhibition, which was called Shalom Chicago. And in 2019, in late October, we opened American Medina, Stories of Muslim Chicago, which is the exhibition which we're discussing now. So that was the origins of the exhibition and what we call our religious suite of exhibitions. I actually volunteered to work on this project through the Oral History Center because I wanted to expand our collections as they relate to American Muslim communities in the city and suburbs. Unfortunately, people who identify as Muslim in the Chicagoland area are woefully underrepresented in our collections. And so we believe through the now over 150 oral histories that have been collected, that we are building a wonderful research archive that will outlive the exhibition, because exhibitions, after all, have an opening date and a closing date. So we are very happy to have been working with Muslim communities around the city and suburbs for the last 4.5 years, the Chicago Muslim Oral History Project, on which American Medina is based, began in the summer of 2016. and has been a wonderful journey and a great experience for all of us having worked on the project. One of the things that we focus on in the exhibition are images and objects borrowed from our oral history narrators. While we've collected 150 interviews, about 40 of those are featured in the exhibition in excerpted form. So just a little bit of a virtual sense of what this exhibition is all about. This is these images are at part of the entry experience of the exhibition. So working from the top clockwise, the top image is of a Bosniak or Muslim from Bosnia group called a Tamburica musical group. Then working to the right clockwise, that is Imam St. Ibrahim in the 1970s praying at his mosque. The young people at the bottom of the screen, they are visiting Imam Ibrahim's mosque. And then at the left, those are Rohingya women who are refugees, and they are preparing a communal meal at the North Side Rohingya Cultural Center on Devon Avenue. So we're virtually entering the exhibition space, and we will look at where, if we were able to visit the exhibition, these listening booths. So there are listening booths that are populated throughout the three main sections of the exhibition. Identity, journey, and faith. This is the identity section. And this is actually the faith section, this young man watching one of the short excerpted oral history interviews. So everything that you're about to see in the rest of this presentation from about the American Medina exhibition would be, if we could meet in person and tour the exhibition, images taken by our professional photographer, Sadaf Syed, who is Muslim and from the Chicagoland area, and also the oral history excerpts and texts that are featured in the exhibition. So as we've been talking about, there's three themes of identity, journey, and faith. So what we did about 2 years into the interviewing process with about 40 oral histories is we gave a close listen to those 40 and thought, what are the themes that rise to the fore? How can we organize the exhibit based on these oral histories and those oral histories yet to be collected? And so we developed those three themes of identity, journey, and faith, with the idea of identity being that, yes, Muslims do have that religious or faith-based identity, but they have many other identities. They may be from the North Side, they may be Choctaw Indian, they may be dancers, they may be novelists, they may be LGBTQ+. And so one aspect of every listening booth is that you get to actually listen to excerpts from folks who are part of Muslim communities today. This is Mr. Daniel Habil, who is a U.S. Army veteran, and he is our first representative here. He's going to talk about his experiences founding and developing the Muslim American Veterans Association and the RTW Veteran Center, which is based on the South Side. And so I'm going to turn it over to him.
In 2009, I get back involved with MAVA, Muslim American Veterans Association. MAVA, in 2010, we became national officers. My wife became an officer over the auxiliary, and I became the national senior vice commander. We created the RTW Veteran Center. It stands for Remake the World. When Imam Warti Muhammad took over in 1975, after his father died, he said, our mission is now to remake the world. Not just the world of Muslims, but to get involved in bringing good into the world. And so it was his lead that really created the MAVA, Muslim American Veterans Association, by him embracing America and showing us that we can be a Muslim and an American patriot at the same time. A patriot is defined as one who has love for his country. And so he truly had love for America. He said we have in America much more freedoms than many Muslim countries around the world to practice our religion.
All right, that is Mr. Daniel Habil in the identity section of the exhibition. Next, we move on to the journey section. And we discovered, of course, through close listening of the oral histories, that yes, there are journeys of immigrants, migrants, and refugees, but there are also those faith journeys where folks grow closer to their faith, in this case, Islam. And so for today's presentation, I picked Mr. Sunil Balic, or Balic, who is from Bosnia, a refugee from the wars in the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s. And he will discuss his experiences as a teenager, really trying to discover his Muslim faith, and also while he was in a camp, exploring his faith and actually praying. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
I was aware of the religion, but I really didn't know the differences between me, and I've started asking some of these questions as the war was brewing, because there was a lot of nationalist sentiment, and I still vividly remember the day when I came home and I've asked my mom, what is the difference between me and two of my friends? And she had to explain to me that one is Serbian Christian Orthodox, and the other one is Catholic. He was Bosnian, but I've asked what the difference is, because it's not something that we were raised with. I think the religion was more of a tradition than actual practicing the religion. So in retrospect, when I think about war, I say that I'm blessed and I'm fortunate, and I don't know who, maybe God watched over me, and I think it was during that time when I started praying, when I started becoming more religious and asking a lot of questions, like, you know, the meaning of everything and why. Life moves on, and I think sometimes it's moving too fast. So when I pray, that's an opportunity for me to really kind of keep reminding myself that I'm blessed for everything that I have, because many people are not here today because they were not fortunate as I was.
All right, thank you for listening to that. I apologize for the siren sound at the end. We were doing the recording at the Harold Washington Library Center in downtown Chicago and just couldn't avoid that fire truck that went by. So with the concluding section of faith, and these are how they're laid out, identity, journey, and faith in the physical exhibition, we discovered by listening to the interviews that yes, Muslims, of course, have their Islamic faith, but how do they express that? They really express that in different ways on a daily basis. And so this last interview clip that we're going to hear is from Ms. Meher Din, who is a native Chicagoan, a recent graduate of DePaul University, and she talks about her teenage years at the Muhammad Webb Foundation in suburban Chicago.
And then when I was in 7th grade, we moved to a Sunday school that was closer. It was called the Webb Foundation. And that was really based on the basis of being an American Muslim and acclimating as an American teenager. So I moved there when I was 13. And I think that was where I started to kind of mold my own idea of what it meant to be a Muslim to me in America, because I'm not in Pakistan where all my cousins were raised with people who look exactly like them and who do the same things and have the same house rules. And so being at this other Sunday school, we would go out to church services, and we would go to local synagogues, and we would volunteer with refugee communities, and we would spend time on religion, but we would spend more time on faith-based service and like what can we do for our community. And we were made to like help others and do service with others, and so how do we do that with our faith guiding us? And I think that's kind of now something that I'm really dedicated to is service and volunteering. And I think that's kind of where that started, was the basis of that.
All right, that was Meher Din and the conclusion of those oral history excerpts. We also, in our discussion of putting this program together, thought about the fact that, especially during this era of the pandemic, that we don't have to wait for an organization like the Chicago History Museum to interview family members, loved ones. That can be over a platform such as Zoom, or even over the phone with different kinds of devices. And so I'm just offering up this PDF, so you want to interview your grandma on Skype from a parenting website. There's plenty of other material out there. So in conclusion, I want to mention that we, as I have already discussed, do our oral history projects with a youth engaged component. So in a moment, Rehan will play the 5 or so minute introductory film from the exhibition that is based on the experiences of the teen historians. In the winter and spring of 2019, we recruited, hired, and trained 8 American Muslim youth who at the time were all high school students. They conducted 17 oral histories with us. They recruited oral history narrators, and they also brought in artifacts for the exhibition. So we're going to see their experiences doing oral histories and how their lives represent those themes of identity, journey, and faith. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion later.
I put on hijab when I was about 12 years old. For me, I was excited. I was like, I'm doing this. This is for me. Like, you know, this is like about reclaiming, you know, my heritage and my religion, like outwardly as like a symbol.
It's not only a scarf that covers my head, but also it's how I act and how I hold myself, that I'm like an ambassador of Islam.
I think the idea that Muslims aren't a monolith is super important.
Each individual's identity encompasses a wide variety of things, whether it be religion and faith, your career, what your hobbies you have, what interests you have.
I love art, I love painting, I love Lord of the Rings, I love Harry Potter, I love science fiction. Who I am is just like a mesh of things. It's not like, oh, you're a Muslim and you also do that stuff. Like, no, I'm all of those things. Like, I can be all of those things.
My family is originally from Afghanistan. His father was a landlord, so when the Russians invaded, they took over my grandfather's land. So my father came to America as a refugee.
I was raised up in a remotely small neighborhood called Newtown in Accra, Ghana. We moved to Chicago when I was 9. My parents came to Chicago because they wanted to seek opportunity.
No, I always liked Malcolm X. Leading on into Islam, it was like a strong feeling that I felt spiritually. I didn't tell my family that I was converting to Islam or thinking about converting to Islam. I don't think I did was kept it to myself.
Journey is very important. We Muslims come from very different areas in the world, whether they're immigrants or whether they're individuals who have been born and raised in Chicago. Wherever you go, you take your identity on with you.
My journey as Muslim was just maintaining who I am, to stay true to my own beliefs and my Muslim heritage, even when there were a few others that I could actually relate with.
Feel like I have a new knowledge of self, a new knowledge of understanding of other people as well. It's who I am now.
Faith to me is everything. It's a moral compass on which I go about my life. My faith is a always consciousness of Allah God in every action I take to think of God, and that is my prayer.
There's a certain coming of age in Islam whereupon all these different things like, giving the charity, prayers, they become like, required upon you. That for 45 minutes a day, you're spending time to reflect upon yourself and what's going on in your life. Then you get to, have that personal connection with God.
Islam is peace. There's always a sense of bonding. There's always a sense of love and support that we have for each other that gives us motivation throughout our everyday life, and it pushes you to be the best practicing Muslim you can.
A lot of the times you'll hear about Muslims in the media and it'll either be an instance of, misrepresentation or not enough representation. And I felt like an exhibit that is consisting wholly of, Muslim experiences and like their dialogues, I felt like that was like a really authentic way to represent Muslims.
And sharing stories of Muslims all across Chicago who shape Chicago in the unique city that it is, in the unique, beautiful city that it is.
Coming to this project, I didn't know any of the other interns who were working here. We have some individuals who are like from Edgewater area and like uptown, and we have like Pakistani and Shias and African Americans, and I want the whole community to understand who we are as a people.
Muslim is one part of our identity, but ultimately we have so many overlapping identities. We're not just like Muslim, but we're also Chicagoan.
To have Chicago be the place where we all come together, and knowing that Chicago is a Muslim city is very great.
I hope that people see Muslims as being people that they can reach out to or speak with, because there's a lot of ignorance around Islam, and so I'm hoping that this exhibition allows for that connection to be made.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing what an inspiring video and these really beautiful photographs and stories from the exhibit. I'm just so excited to hear more, learn more, and come visit Chicago on the next chance I get. I'd like to turn now to Sanctuary at the Aga Khan Museum. In this exhibition, 36 contemporary artists meditate on the central theme of sanctuary through the unexpected medium of woven rugs. These arresting artworks, including pieces by the UK-based Palestinian artist Mona Khatoum and the Chicago-based Brendan Fernandez, challenge viewers to think about sanctuary in the context of conflict, mass migration, and the personal quest to arrive and to belong. Michael, can you please tell us more?
Thank you, Zahra, and welcome to everyone for joining us today. This is a really wonderful opportunity to revisit a little bit in retrospect an exhibition that we staged at the Aga Khan Museum this past year between March and due to the COVID closure that we experienced early on. It was extended till when we reopened, and so the exhibition ended up staying on view until October. For those of you who don't know, the Aga Khan Museum is North America's only art museum devoted to the art and culture of the Islamic world. The mission of the museum is to bridge cultures through the arts and to contribute to expanded knowledge of the role of Muslim civilizations and their contributions to world heritage. Sanctuary, as Zahra mentioned at the beginning, was an exhibition that was that we brought on from its originating organization, a place called the Foresight Foundation, which is based in San Francisco. And so in that context, the exhibition, in fact, was formulated in 2016, 2017. And it grew up in a particular context. It grew out of this, the ongoing debates about migration and immigration, sanctuary, and those sorts of themes that were very much at the forefront of the conversation at that time, particularly around migrations across the southern border of the United States. The exhibition features the work of 36 leading international contemporary artists who created designs for the unusual or not often encountered medium in museum context. This is the personal rug, which is of a size and shape that suggests, in fact, conceptually, the prayer rug, this object that is so central to devotional practice, to prayer in the Muslim tradition. And the idea was for these artists from around the world, from a variety of backgrounds, to think about the theme of sanctuary and to contribute designs that could be woven into rugs that captured their own personal visual expressions of the theme of sanctuary. Now, before I go into a sort of detailed presentation, just to let you know, we were able to capture the exhibition using 3D camera technology, which allowed us to preserve how the exhibition looked in space. And this is a virtual tour that you can take. It's actually online at our website at agakhanmuseum.org. And I'm going to walk through this 3D capture of the exhibition for you. So the exhibition, in fact, lives on in perpetuity online. Let me share my screen with you. So and I hope that you can see this. So here's a sort of rough 3D model overview of the space, and we'll just enter into the exhibition here. As you walked through the entrance of the exhibition, we have our introductory text on our right, and on the left were videos that actually captured text with some pretty stark statistics about sanctuary and migration, about the number of people who have been displaced across the world due to various kinds of crisis. And also about statistics about attitudes of those who come to places where they weren't originally from. And so that really set the stage for this experience of the exhibition as you walk in. Now, the exhibition in its incarnation in San Francisco presented the 36 carpets, many of which you can see here, in a grid on the floor in a small space, the Fort Mason Chapel. And the idea was for people to be able to walk into the exhibition, to step on the carpets with bare feet, to experience the tactility of the carpets, to really get a sense of their own bodies in relation to these works of art. Because of COVID, we weren't able to allow people to interact in that way with the carpets, but they could still get very close. And as you can see, we still kept the carpets on the floor. One of the big changes of the exhibition as it was translated to the Aga Khan Museum was that we wanted to show carpets, some of them upright and some of them on the floor, to accentuate different properties of the carpets. We also divided the show into 3 thematic sections, and this is the first section that you're looking at that focuses on the theme of sanctuary in the age of displacement. These are carpets that focus primarily on the notion of movement due to displacement because of crisis. And so a lot of the carpets deal with some pretty heavy themes related to conflict, to war, and to other kinds of displacement, economic displacement, and so forth. One of the carpets that was hung prominently in this section is this here. This is a carpet with a design by the Tlingit artist based in Alaska, Nicholas Galanin, who created this carpet, the White Noise American Prayer Rug. And as you can see, it's a representation of a television screen with that white noise streaking across the surface. And it I think really effectively captures the sense of that kind of visual experience. Of the White Noise American Prayer Rug, Galanin writes, "This is the American prayer rug. a reflection of an image accompanying a droning sound to distract us from our own suffering, from love, from land, from water, from connection. There is no space for prayer, only noise. And I think that this is a very powerful statement about how in times of conflict, in times of mass, an opportunity for mass empathy, in fact, when we see people displaced because of conflict, what often comes through, this is information coming through media sources like the news, which often doesn't present an objective view, but really just presents this kind of white noise, as Galanin so effectively captures in this carpet. And I think that this was a very important piece to show in this section. As you move through the exhibition, you'll notice that the walls themselves are in fact not really walls. They're made, as you can see here, of textiles, and they sort of lean into one another. They don't create any 90-degree angles. The point of this was to, which I'll talk a bit more about at the end, but part of this was really to express an idea that we didn't want these sections of the exhibition to be divided in very rigid ways, that they all had a sort of porosity with each other. They blended into one another. And so that these, the next theme very much depends on the first. This is a theme of the exhibition, second theme, called Sanctuary of the Mind. And it's here that we group together carpets that take a more abstract, a more personal approach to the idea of sanctuary, of creating a space to really think about one's own identity and one's relationship to the concept of safety, to the concept of home. The idea of the prayer carpet is to really delineate a space that is ritualistically pure so that prayers could be said. But if we extrapolate from that more metaphorically, it's really to create a space that exists already in your mind. This is a space of safety, a space of mental purity, in a sense, where you do reflect on yourself, your relationship to the world, your relationship to the universe, the cosmos, the divine. And it's in these carpets that we see these expressions of self in relation to the rest of the world. One of the carpets that sort of bridges these two sections is this rug by the Houston-based artist Jamal Cyrus. Cyrus is known for his research-based practice, focusing primarily on Black history in the United States, on social justice, on the civil rights movement, and being able to capture the plenitude of that history, which has so often been limited in historical research. This carpet is called X-Plane, and as you can see, it's situated on the floor. What we see is a sort of document. You can see a representation of a document with its own sort of timestamp and lines, redactions, and so forth, overlaid over this impression on the ground. This is actually concrete with footprints. What this is a rubbing that Cyrus took himself of the place where the American civil rights leader, Muslim leader Malcolm X was assassinated, outside of the Audubon ballroom in Harlem in New York City. As you can imagine, Cyrus himself made a journey that was very much a personal journey for him to this spot, to this sacred site, in a sense, and created a rubbing, really overlaying. You can picture him on the ground, overlaying his own body on this site where an incredible moment, a poignant moment in history unfolded. The document that's overlaid on that is Malcolm X's, the first page of his his FBI file. And so here we see the sort of institutionalization of knowledge about this whole moment overlaid on the trace of that moment itself. And so this is really a way for Jamal Cyrus to capture and to juxtapose these two different kinds of making history. I'll just quote his own words about the piece. From this perspective, the document becomes the representation of a three-dimensional space. In this case, an archive, a reservoir of information, knowledge, possibly enlightenment, a place where reading is done ritualistically and new insights beyond the two-dimensional plane are revealed. So again, this very important work of art that through its own medium, through the medium of the rug, really recalls this, the space that he himself went to, took a journey to seek information about identity and how that identity relates to history. As we go through this space, we'll enter the third section of the exhibition, which is called the Universal Sanctuary. And here, these are a group of carpets that focus on this very broad theme of our own relationship to the cosmos, of, in fact, the earth as a sanctuary, the cosmos as a sanctuary. And the first carpet that you encounter in this space is a work by Shirazeh Hoshiari, who's an Iranian artist based in London. And it's a work that's based on a series of etchings that she created called Migrants. Here, these are depictions of the Singaporean rain tree. The Singaporean rain tree are these beautifully canopied trees that you see throughout the island nation of Singapore. They're so prominent, in fact, that they've become a sort of national symbol of Singapore. But the interesting thing about the Singaporean rain tree is that it's not native to Singapore. Though it's become sort of naturalized and has become so naturalized as to become a national symbol, it in fact is a species native to South America that made its way to Southeast Asia, probably through birds who held the seeds or some other means. But the seeds were implanted in Southeast Asia, and here they grow and they thrive. For Hoshiari, this is a wonderful metaphor of the migrant experience, the immigration experience, where you can thrive and become completely embedded within a society, within a culture, even though you may not be there yourself. Of course, it also calls to mind this great universal notion that nature, the environment, doesn't really see national borders, doesn't see the lines that we draw between ourselves, that nature doesn't operate according to those principles. So this is an important reminder of that very fact, that in fact the whole world is in its own way a sanctuary. We wanted to accentuate that idea of the universal sanctuary by, in a couple ways. This is also unique to this staging, the Aga Khan Museum staging of the exhibition, which was to use completely environmentally sustainable materials in our installation. As you can see here, we have these threads to create the walls. Those threads were actually produced from t-shirts, used t-shirts that were donated to the exhibition by members of the surrounding community. We put out a we put out a t-shirt drive in essence. The t-shirts were then stripped and sort of categorized according to their color, so that we could create these threads and this sort of these gradations of color throughout the space using used materials. These threads have actually been taken down from the space. They've been collected, and we're holding on to them till after our current lockdown so that we can create bags and other usable materials that can be donated to communities in need. So there will be a third and a fourth life of this material beyond the exhibition and beyond their initial use as t-shirts. Other elements, the vinyl lettering on the floors and of the signs, this was all done with vinyl is actually terrible for the environment, and exhibitions create a lot of waste through vinyl, through drywall. We didn't use drywall, as we noted. The vinyl itself is recyclable. We sent it back to the factory where it will be melted down and reused for other uses later on. And the texts on the walls were actually not printed either, and they're not put on placards. These were all handwritten by a local artist, a calligrapher named Joel Cottrell, who we commissioned to actually develop a unique font for the exhibition. And he came in and he actually hand painted the museum signs, the museum signage on the wall for this exhibition. So as you can see, we thought of this as a sort of holistic project and an installation in its own right, linking together these themes of security, safety, refuge, in a very, I think, in a very united sort of way. So I'll stop the share here and turn it back over to Zahra.
Thank you, Michael, so much for sharing such a powerful exhibit. I mean, just tremendous. And thank you both for sharing just a taste of two very powerful and thought-provoking installations. I really enjoyed how each of them showcased so poignantly for us this shared quest for peace in this world and the next, and how each of them also reflects the diversity of expression and identity of the world's Muslims, who today form 1/4 of the global population. That diversity, as we've seen, is one of language, culture, and tradition, and also of interpretation, place, and personal search. It's also well reflected in the American Muslim population in Chicago and elsewhere. So to open up our panel conversation, I'd like to ask the first question to Peter. Peter, I'm curious about the role of the curator in naming the exhibit. What does it mean to call Chicago an American Medina? And when and how did Chicago get this title?
Sure, and thank you very much. And sometimes curators have a big role and sometimes a very small role. So I think this naming opportunity was somewhere in between. Through our research, especially in literature over the last 5 to 10 to 15 years, we discovered that Muslims living in Chicagoland would often call this area the American Medina, with the idea that, of course, Medina in Saudi Arabia is the second holiest city in the faith of Islam. And so that was something that we wanted to use and that we thought was in keeping with also the history of Muslim communities in Chicago, with one of the first purpose-built mosques, for example, in the United States being at the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893, which also brought early Arab populations to the city, Palestinians and Syrians especially. Other events, maybe too numerous to mention, but the Ahmadiyya movement of Islam moved here in the 1920s. The Nation of Islam moved here in the 1930s, and many other events that sort of help show Chicago as having this primacy in the history of Muslims in the country.
Wonderful, fascinating. Thank you, Peter. Michael, I really loved the framing of the exhibit as this universal shared search for physical, mental, and spiritual refuge and peace, and how many of the rugs really evoke the collective relationship of creation to the divine or the cosmos. If you could share with us, please, how does a curator decide to tell a larger story? And more specifically, with respect to Sanctuary, how did you conceive of the 3 stages and how to order a rich diversity of pieces within them?
It's a great question. It's a complicated question. I think that, curators are trained in very specific fields, and but we all understand that museums are a medium. It's a form of media, like television, like the radio, like the internet. And our purpose is really to connect the ideas that interest us, that we're trained to talk about, in ways that speak to our audiences, that draw them in and to really understand the broader principles behind these ideas. And so there's always an eye, I would say, on that big picture, those big picture questions. Why is this relevant to me? We can put ourselves in our visitors' shoes when they're asking this. Why is this relevant to me? And I always try to, at least when I think about exhibitions, when I put them together, I always try to think about that question, knowing that that's what's going to be asked perhaps in the back of people's minds when they walk in. With respect to the three sections of the exhibition, we, as I mentioned, we received a checklist of 36 carpets that were shown in the original staging. The space that we were going to show them in is much larger than the original space that they were intended for. And so I thought to myself that I wanted to create a narrative around these. And in fact, the narrative is very simple. In this exhibition, we move from this sort of just theme of displacement to something much more universal and hopeful. And I wanted to sort of create an arc that moved us from the idea of the need to find home because of conflict toward we are at home by being in the cosmos. And it ends on that more uplifting tone. So I feel like I wanted to create this emotional arc in the sort of choreography of the space. And that was, many of the carpets just lent themselves to particular themes.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Michael. I think continuing with this theme of storytelling and sort of this emotive arc of connection and of this grander idea that something is bigger than us. Peter, I was really struck by one of the teens' narratives talking about how he lives Islam every day, and that is his prayer. I thought that was just so deep and just so moving. And how so many of the narrators showed us how their faith is embodied in these acts of justice and search and stewardship as they and their families and communities are navigating conflict and change and peace and prosperity. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about these oral histories. Do you feel that they are uniquely Muslim, or do you feel that they demonstrate experiences that are shared across the human condition, regardless of one's faith or identity? How might someone who's not Muslim consume these pieces?
Yes, excellent. And thank you very much for that question, Zahra. And also thank you to Michael for kind of setting me up also for, to some extent, a similar answer. And just listening to Michael a moment ago, using words like universal and what does it mean to, what is the significance to our visitorship, to our membership, which of course is primarily non-Muslim audiences. And so when we thought about those themes of identity, journey, and faith, well, they came out of those oral histories that were conducted with American Muslims in the city and suburbs. However, they are universal themes. We have identities that we create and construct and see in different ways. You know, whether you're the offspring of someone or the parent of someone. We have journeys. They may be faith journeys. They may be journeys through life. They may be physical journeys across your homeland. And of course, faith, yes, maybe not everyone has a religious faith, but we may have faith in our team winning the World Series, or that our siblings will come through for us in a difficult time. And so we even did some audience testing before the exhibition opened with those three themes, seeing that they were universal. And so we wanted these themes to matter. And we created interactives in the exhibition that would bring out those themes. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to get rid of some of those hands-on interactives. But they do also play very much to those things like, what does faith mean to you? What is your identity? And so thank you very much for that question. We really enjoyed kind of thinking along those lines as we put the exhibition together.
Thank you, Peter. That's beautiful. Michael, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the practical purpose of art. I was really inspired by your conceptualization of sustainability, both in the installation and in the exhibit space, from the walls to the seating to the lettering, and how each of those was a means to honor the earth as this sustainable sanctuary. I feel like that really resonates with multiple sacred traditions, including Islam, but not limited to Islam, that view humanity as trustees or stewards of divine gifts, including the earth. And I think the more touching thing for me was that these installation elements will be reused to create bags and blankets for vulnerable communities. And if anything, the pandemic has shown us that sanctuary is a privilege, that some communities lack access to shelter, food, clothing, water, healthcare. What advice do you have for our viewers who want to make and donate sustainable art or practical pieces from everyday items, also to help vulnerable populations locally, to help them live with peace and dignity?
It's a great question. I really appreciate your framing of the sustainability as a sort of a nod to this notion of stewardship that sort of transcends faith communities and expressions of faith, because that's certainly where my mind was with that. But I think that right now, the COVID crisis has really changed a lot of things in museums, and this idea of being able to just in this exhibition, being able to reuse the materials, we have to really reconsider in a lot of ways, because we can't allow some of these materials to be touched. So how is it that you can create something sustainable, let's say by reusing it, in an era where we're trying to not allow people to touch materials and to share materials in that way? It's a really difficult question, and it's one that requires a lot of thinking through. I would say a couple things. For those who are interested in creating art or doing something artistic that could benefit people and do so in a sustainable way, one thing that what we can do, and for a while now we're going to have to continue to do, is of course wear masks. If there's a way to sort of reuse materials that you have, I know a lot of people have clothes, let's say, or fabric that they inherited from their families from a long time ago. We can think about reusing those really artistic textiles in a way. Some of them are actually quite nice, and making really beautiful masks that people can use, that one can use with these materials that have a certain kind of heritage. So there's a sort of giving of yourself, of your own family identity, of your own background, to reuse very beautiful artistic materials in ways that are very practical today. And of course, thinking through how to do so where the fabric is clean and you're not transmitting anything nefarious with that material, I think is good. The other is I'm really inspired by Peter's project and by the oral history project of it. There's a certain kind of art form in encouraging people to compile their own histories during this time. Everyone, kids in particular, are stuck at home and interfacing with their families in different ways. Creating a record of that experience by scrapbooking, by creating a digital archive, a photographic archive of the kinds of conversations that we're having through mediated technologies like Zoom, I think would be really interesting. And to being able to bring together that kind of experience and to tell one's personal story in that way during this time actually is a really wonderful record of this experience, and it can be constructed in a way that I think that approaches art making very closely.
Yeah, I think those are really great ideas and just so unique and something especially useful in this pandemic. I want to ask another question that kind of brings these two exhibitions together and meditates a bit more on this moment of the pandemic. I feel like American Medina really shows us the local groundedness of a rich tapestry of stories on the one hand, while Sanctuary, on the other hand, speaks to these transnational, even cosmic themes of mobility, identity, and faith. And I'm wondering, how does marrying these two approaches of the hyper-local and the hyper-global, especially in the age of COVID, change how we see the world? Does it invite us to reflect on how our local choices and actions have global implications and impacts, or conversely, how global events might impact local communities in unique ways? Peter, Michael, your thoughts?
I can just jump in first from that sort of hyper-local perspective. We certainly, with our exhibition, American Medina Stories of Muslim Chicago, saw that global events, such as events in Burma or Myanmar that drive the persecuted Muslim minority out of Burma on long migratory trips, and many ending up here in Chicago, that those global events have impact in Chicago. And so I think that that's something definitely that I've taken away from these kinds of narratives, really without looking for them or without trying to illustrate them. They rise to the fore on their own.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Taking from the opposite angle, being able to look at global or even cosmic stories. There's a carpet in the exhibition by an artist named Oman, who was born in Somalia and moved around and is now based in New York. The carpet that they created is based on a design that extracts a little element of the Hubble Space Telescope deep space photography. And what it shows are all these multicolored dots arranged sort of haphazardly against a black background. It's this beautiful mosaic, and it really speaks to this sort of cosmic reflection of our own experience as a bunch of little galaxies with different properties, different colors, different shapes that come together in a single space to create this very beautiful mosaic, in a sense. And if we think about our local communities very much in that same way, everyone has a unique experience. Just whether we in our own communities share certain threads of identity, we also have our own individual identities that speak to this broader mosaic. And that can be extrapolated as far back as you want it, as Uman's piece points out, to the very cosmic. And I think that by focusing on these times where we can come together in ways like this that allow us to think about our scattering across space, but we can come together in this very local format. I can just see this box on my screen here with everyone's face. It gives us a moment to sort of pause on these bigger questions about who we are and our connections to each other through our shared humanity. But I think the exhibition in Chicago, the exhibition in Toronto look at these sorts of issues from two different ends of the telescope, as it were.
That's really beautifully put. Thank you, Michael. I think we have time for one of our audience questions. The question, I think, is in response to the video that was shown of the Chicago teens. And a couple of the girls decided to don the headscarf, the hijab. And the question is asking about whether this is a form of stereotyping of Muslim women that is being perpetuated. And does the hijab, in fact, predate Islam? Or perhaps are, other faith traditions also covering in different ways that are not talked about as much? Peter, maybe you could weigh in on that?
Sure. Let me start with the sort of teen angle of it. And so those interview snippets are part of longer interviews, trying to elicit the young people's sort of personal views about their own identity. And those two young women decided on their own to talk about wearing the headscarf. And so that wasn't something that we necessarily elicited or sought to stereotype anyone with, but certainly there is that stereotype especially I would say in the United States from my own experience. I also think, yes, there are other head coverings that are not talked about as much. One of the things that we discussed in some of our team meetings, of course, however you describe Mary, the mother of Jesus, the Virgin Mary in some faith traditions, that she is, I think, always shown wearing some kind of head covering. And so that certainly gave us food for thought, and me especially as a practicing Christian to think about that in different ways. So I appreciate that question, and that also gave us an opportunity to kind of further flesh out the teen video and the context of it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peter. Well, I think that brings our panel conversation to a close. So thank you both so much, Michael and Peter, for the generosity of your time, your wisdom, your spirit. A huge thanks to the Aga Khan Museum and the Chicago History Museum for sharing their exhibits virtually, and also to all of our viewers for your time and your engagement. We wish everybody very well on your respective journeys to find peace and light now and always. To conclude today's event, there is a special performance that's been recorded within the Sanctuary exhibit in Toronto by guitar virtuoso Manelli Jamal. Manelli is one of the world's top 30 guitarists under the age of 30 and has soloed in 17 countries around the world. His visual performance style is a feast for the eyes and the ears because he brings together these multiple musical textures all in one place. We hope you enjoy the selection.
This song that I'm going to play for you here is a special song for me. It was written in memory of my childhood in Germany. And growing up in the Western world my whole life, I know how important it is to have your cultural background there as well, musically speaking, of course. And when I was a little boy, I remember my dad was in the room to the right of me, and my mom was in the room to the left of me. And my punishment growing up was always to draw and to paint, because both of my parents are musicians and artists. As I was there, forced to paint and draw as my punishment, my dad was playing Persian violin. Really nostalgic, really sort of haunting Persian melodies that stuck with me ever since. And to the room to the left of me was my mom listening to Western classical music like Tchaikovsky, Bach, Beethoven, all the greats. So in my left ear, there was this Western influence, and in my right ear was this Middle Eastern influence. And I think later on in my life, when I eventually moved to Canada, I realized how important these cultural differences were. I try to cultivate that with this piece here called Zahra.
What an amazing performance. I'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Alter, Dr. Chagnon, for a truly insightful discussion. And thank you to our moderator, Dr. Jamal, for facilitating this session. Learning about the exhibits and hearing your perspective has been extremely valuable and insightful. On behalf of the Ismaili Jamaat Khana and Center, we also want to thank each and every one of you that have joined virtually from across the world. We hope that you found the program to be as valuable as we did. To get more information about the Ismaili Jamaat Khana and Center, please go to the .ismaili in your web browser. And for more information on upcoming program, please go to facebook.com/thesmileyusa. We look forward to sharing future programming with you as well. Thank you and have a good evening.